No.
All right. So that's what we, all right. We're here. Addicted Kids, Concerned Parents, round two. I'm Ed Ratush. This is Dr. Welge,
Welge, yeah.
Alex Welge. And today we're going to talk about, I think, a provocative topic in addiction, because it challenges us to think about the underpinnings of addiction as it stands. And
Right.
Dr. Welge and I were talking earlier in the week, and I shared something with him, and he didn't know about it. So he went and did his research, and he's going to share with us what he learned. But it's an interesting story, and I'll just give the name. It's called Rat Park, and I'll leave it to Dr. Welch to tell the tale. Go.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just before we go into that, just want to make sure I clarify this for everybody, that addiction by itself, what is addiction? It's any behavior that you find temporary pleasure or relief that becomes then a craving, and then you suffer negative consequences, but you just can't give it up. It's just important to think about, it can be any behavior: gambling, sex, relationships, power. People on Wall Street may crave power, for example. They get addicted to that. Workaholism, internet, social media, eating, these are all behaviors. So it's not just substance use. So just to think about it that way, it's important. So this nice, it's amazing. Thank you so much for helping me, because intuitively I knew that this is the correct thing, but now actually seeing evidence, studies. So Rat Park is what has been famously now coined as a group of experiments that Dr. Bruce Alexander did in the 1970s. So we've heard, and it kind of reframes our whole concept of addiction. So initially, in this one cage, this rat is there, and it only has one bottle of water or one bottle with either heroin or cocaine. And I think I kind of alluded to this at the last session. The rat will choose invariably the cocaine or the heroin, and then it will die of an overdose. And 100% of the time, the rat ends up dying. But you can think of it that way. Oh, well, the rat made the wrong choice. Well, you should make the right choice. That's what this is all about. You're bad for making the wrong choice. And then we start that. A lot of our way of thinking about addiction was based on that part. But Dr. Bruce Alexander had this amazing question. Said, what about, is it maybe, the rat is there by itself? Is it maybe related to the setting in which this is happening? The rat is sitting there in this cage by itself. It's got nothing else to do.
So in a way, the challenge was, is addiction 100% biological in the brain that's controlled by this outside chemical going in, taking control and reaping havoc on the human being whose brain this chemical has inhabited and sensitized the brain to? Or is the environment a major role player in the creating of the addiction phenomenon, of the maladaptive behavior, as you were saying, pursuing bad behavior despite the known consequences? Right?
Exactly. And so what he did is that he created this rat heaven, this rat park for these rats. So he created this amazing place. So it's this huge park where they can play. They have these wheels they can play on. They've got their favorite cheeses. They've got all these nice scenery and trees around them. They've got nice straw. They can interact freely, and they can roam freely. They can have sex with each other. And you have the bottle of water and the bottle of heroin. And guess what happens? 0 overdoses. Now that's shocking, isn't it? That's what changes the whole dynamic. What is it? What happened here where you went from 100% overdose in isolation and 0% overdose when you're given the opportunity to do something else? It's the idea, the theory is becoming that there's a bonding happening. The bonding, the social atmosphere, the socialization, the bonding that the community, that the rat is enjoying, it wants to preserve its consciousness. It wants to be part of that bonding, more attractive than the drug, right? And so this is the new way of thinking about it. How can we learn from this experiment. If we in our society have become put everybody in a cage, in a rat cage, for example, you try to punish pain out of people for their addiction by making life hard for them, put them in jail, shun them from getting jobs. Now they're isolated.
So here's the
And
interesting thing, Dr. Welge, like lay people, non-scientists, non-physicians, certainly non-scientists, like have an easier time of understanding why this makes sense, that it might be more than the drug that's causing the addiction, right? Yet scientists and sometimes even clinical people like you and I sometimes just buy into the test paradigms and the science as we do it, as if it could be translated to the real world as is. And what we have here is a clear suggestion that, hey, these rodents that are being experimented on are in jail. They're in prison. And if they're in prison, why wouldn't we be able to, if they're in prison, why wouldn't they want to escape it in some kind of way with substances? It's a dark thought, but I've watched a lot of HBO, and I remember like the show Oz, and I think I was a kid, but I remember thinking, man, if I was in jail, I would do drugs too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a clear thought.
Okay.
It wasn't like a debated thought, and it's now 3 decades later. I really don't, or more, more. I don't know if I feel differently about it. I don't want to be in jail. I don't know what I would do if I was, but I certainly have the same sentiment about at least empathy for the need to escape a situation. Yeah. And so it's interesting.
This
right?
is this is very interesting what you're saying, because the need for escape, right? So if we start thinking of addiction in a different way, like thinking about this paradigm, I'm just going to take off from what you just said, because that escape is the key word. The addiction is the solution.
That's right.
That the person is reaching for to deal with
the
that
terrible
pain,
circumstances that they find themselves in. Now,
exactly.
So you could expand, because it doesn't have to be just a prison. It could be some type of a torture chamber. Well, what kind of torture chamber? Well, maybe guilt. Maybe something terrible happened and somehow you ascribe the responsibility to yourself. In families with kids, we, I think, underestimate the absorption power of our children. They learn probably tens of times faster and more dynamically than we do as adults.
Yes.
And they absorb everything, but most of it doesn't make sense the way we think it makes sense in our world. And a couple of days back, my son said, you never apologized to mommy for yelling at her. I'm like, hey, my wife's standing next to me. I'm like, did I yell it? Did we have an argument? What? And she was like, oh yeah, remember we were in Long Branch and you were nervous about this and you said that. And I'm like, yeah, oh yes. And my son was just like, he hasn't resolved this.
Right.
He didn't get a resolution. I might have said words that meant one thing, but in his world meant something else. Like, because my wife and I don't have this battleground over that discussion. It wasn't a big thing. And yet my son remembered it enough to point out to me that there's an apology missing and he's worried that maybe I've harmed her in some way. And so now he's taking on responsibility for protecting his mother from his father. And nothing happened.
Right.
Now imagine, as we alluded to in last week's discussion about ACEs and adverse childhood events that are real, like real fights and real violence and real substance use and real abandonment and real financial struggles and real predicaments and illness and divorce and And the child is absorbing all of this. And so at some point, they need to break free. They need to escape.
They need to escape. This is very important. This is so crucial to understanding how to help children because, like you're saying, they don't have complex emotions. They don't know how to handle complex emotions. A child needs to know that it's safe and that it's loved, right? It can't understand why mom and dad are acting crazy and being scary and yelling and violent in front of the child. The child doesn't know it's getting scared. It doesn't know how to deal with the world.
And then
The
a
world
parent
becomes a
turns
scary
to the
place.
child and addresses them as if they're not aware of what's going on. Oh, so you don't want to play this? I thought you were hungry. You're not hungry? All right, go play with your friends. Like, no, they're participating in this scenario. This is actually something that's for next week, in a sense. But we should review the concept of system theory and as it applies to the dynamics of family relationships, right? Because here's this system, this family system, and we're pretending that the child isn't an active participant because they're just a kid. But just because we pretend that way doesn't mean they're not actively participating, actively absorbing everything that's going on.
Everything. They're picking up everything. And this is very important. We should definitely talk about this. I just want to go back to one thing just to clarify that first thought. So that big experiment, the rat park, the idea is that there's a human need for bonding. There is a human need for connection. And if you give the rat all these options to connect and bond with all of its fellow rats and have a good time, that bonding is so sufficient to meet that rat's needs. It's not looking for the drug to fulfill any need. It's satisfied. If you don't give the rat anything, it's going to bond with the drug. If you leave the rat in that cage, it's going to bond with that drug. That's what it's doing. It's bonding with it. So if you think of addiction in that way, instead of calling it addiction, maybe calling it bonding, it changes the way you look at it.
Well, it's a placeholder, right? It's a placeholder of its own, right? It's a placeholder for something more meaningful, more real. The problem is that, and this goes, again, back to the discussion of Rat Park itself, is that it's being used in a very controversial way. These ideas are wonderful ideas, and these thoughts about how environment contributes to the dynamic of addiction is a very beautiful and magnificent thing to explore. But unfortunately, I think it's being somewhat politicized to devalue the biological underpinnings of addiction. And those, unfortunately, for all of us, are very, very real. And the areas of the brain that are involved are very protected areas. And most things don't get to them. So there's only a few things in terms of substances that actually get there. And when they do, they imprint themselves into this place of, whether you call it the reptile brain or what have you, but it's a place of a creation of meaning for that individual. And once something becomes meaningful there, it becomes as meaningful as our needs and drives, like our need for socialization, right? That's like a need for sleep. That's like a need for food. We know this because we know this in societies, and we also know this in prison. The worst thing you could do to someone in jail is to isolate them by themselves. Think about it. You could be in the worst maximum security prison with rapists and killers and real life sociopaths. But the worst thing you could do to someone in that scenario is to keep them by themselves.
Yes, exactly. And this is exactly what you're saying. So I think America, and a lot of the world we live in now, is probably the more lonely and isolated people are feeling than probably in a very long time. And this is what is very important to understand, the context of what this child is dealing with and what we're all dealing with. I just want to connect a few more dots that you just brought up here. So trauma, invariably, every case of addiction originates in trauma. So that's the thing. There's some sort of painful abandonment, some sort of not being understood, some sort of lack of nurturing, lack of validation,
right?
And all those ACEs you mentioned, right? The violence, the abuse, the neglect. the family members that are dealing with substance abuse, the family members that are dealing with mental illness, the parent that is in jail. These are all traumatic for this child. And this child is then dealing with this trauma. And the higher the ACE score, the exponential risk of them getting addicted. It's very, this has been shown. And so you see what's happening here is you have to think of this addiction as the choice that the individual is making to treat that underlying sense of abuse or neglect or pain. And so the way you treat the addict is not to punish them for being in pain. The way you treat it is to help them with the pain, help them with the trauma. That's the opposite of the way we're doing it. We're punishing them, isolating them. Now we've created a system where they're in jail. They can't get a job because nobody wants to hire them because of the history. They can't connect to people in the society. Everybody's shunning them. They're all by themselves. They've been put in a cage, a rat cage. And the only thing that's left is that addiction that they've had, and they haven't learned how to deal with the trauma that led them to the addiction. And now you basically create more addiction this way. You can't create a better situation for the addict. I mean, a society is actually promoting it in this way. We've created that cage. How do you unbreak this cage is to do what? Hi, George.
Hey, guys.
How do you break this cage is to actually build that sense of community, that sense of bonding again. So right now, that child is sitting there at home, right? The child is sitting there, both parents are working their ass off, excuse my language. They're trying to make ends meet. They're having to work 2 jobs. Inflation is out. Now the child is scared to go to school because there's school shootings. They're scared to go to church because there are church shootings. The sense of community doesn't dare to know its neighbor. It's sitting at home and there's a tablet. Right? And now he's connected to the internet. And you've given him nothing else but to bond with other than that tablet. So here you created another cage. Well, and this is the problem.
You know, so I want to connect, because, you know, you like the thought of it being an escape. And we talked about ACEs. Would you say that these adverse childhood events then impair a child's ability for connectivity, right? Because you suggested that the issue that people are having is a connectivity issue. So they end up connected to substances or maladaptive behaviors that bring back some kind of reward, right? But are you suggesting that these adverse events are then actually impairing a person's capability of making connections and keeping connections? And it's an interesting thought, right? I'm just as an exercise, because it's almost like it's anxiety provoking. If I get close and bad things happen again, it will be my fault, you know, or whatever, you know, like even just having a parent who's sick, just a parent, you know, I herniated L4, L5, trying to get strong in November under the guidance of proper professionals, and my kid is very aware that daddy hurt his back, that daddy can't carry stuff, that, you know, he jokes about it, but he's also serious about it. He's connected to it. So these are like and we don't address it with our kids. We don't address like how they're experiencing our pain or our anxiety or you know, our stress at work. But they're experiencing it. You know, if we think about our own childhood, and George, thanks for joining us. I wanted to ask you what you think so far. But like, you know, when we think about our own childhood, we probably remember times where we were looking at our parents going, oh my God, like this is the first time I realized they're vulnerable and they don't know what the hell they're doing also. We all had that pivotal moment where we realized that our parents don't know the answers. You know, I remember mine. I was 6 years old, you know, and we were refugees from the then Soviet Union trying to make our way to the United States of America. And I watched my dad break down, and I was like, holy shit, he don't know what's going on either. You know, he's scared too. You know, I was terrified, but then I knew I couldn't even share it with them. Because if he's so broken up, I don't want to make it worse. I got to be a tough boy and tough it out by myself, right? And I think all of us remember taking on those burdens as children, and then we become parents and we don't realize that we're burdening our kids the same way.
Yes,
Because we're in
yes.
a pattern. We don't mean to, but that's just how we've been. So George, what say you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I deal with the same kind of realizations, and I try to give my children that understanding. So I want to know what's your thoughts on that. Like, I try to show my children my imperfections and let them know, like, hey, I get triggered by these things. These things happen in my life. Do you think that's a good route to take with your child, or are you like devaluing yourself and losing credibility if you show too much of your vulnerability to your children?
Before
I think it's
we tackle that, and I'll let you start, Alex. George is a admin, supervisor, administrative lead, more than that, director of all services. There's a lot of titles involved, but he's a wonderful SohoMD team member, and also co-hosts our podcast Beyond the Therapy Session. And we're very happy that he's joining us to help flesh this out as a non-therapist, but someone who is a parent and cares about these dynamics. So thanks, George, for being here with us. And Dr. Welge, go ahead, shoot, answer, and then I'll join after you.
Okay, great. I'm going to connect the dots between both of you, actually, with what you both said in this sense, because the child, I think it's important, George, what you're doing for a child is allowing the child to know it's okay to be vulnerable and that you're going to get through this together as a family. And you're strong enough that you're able to open that up and deal with it, but you're not being a baby about it. You're just overwhelmed by it, but hey, you're going to deal with it. And you show them how you deal with it. And watching you dealing with it, they learn that they were also going to be able to deal with it, and they're going to be able to count on you. When you have this experience, Ed, you know, you're seeing your dad being so shaken up, and it's scary, and you know it's scary, but you didn't have that conversation with him to allow you to pursue and understand, you know, it's okay to be scared right now. We're going to get through this as a family. We're going to pull this thing together. You were told, and the message, it seems, was, okay, I have to be strong. I have to avoid and neglect these feelings I'm dealing with. I'm just going to have to suck it up, and we're all going to have to suck it up. And we're always going to be tough and toughen this way out, and I've got to be strong. Because if dad is vulnerable, I got to be strong. I can't be weak. And so there's a part of this that then you learn not to deal with the pain, the trauma that you experienced. And ultimately, it's that trauma that you experienced that you need to deal with. But you don't get a chance to explore it. You get a chance to deal with it. So what do you do then to seek relief? You may seek a drug, because the situation is so difficult to cope with. You don't have the adult helping you process the complexity of this. You don't have them helping you feel that we're still going to be fine. Don't worry. I'm strong enough. Yes, we got this going on, but I'm going to be strong enough for you still. I'm still that rock. We're just going to deal with a tough time together. And this is something that would help the child. You know, like the child that goes out and plays, comes back and races to the mom and says, you know what, I just got bullied and everybody's chasing, these kids are tearing, and the mom says, you know what, go right back outside and deal with it. We don't run away from our problems. We face our problems. Okay, the child then gets the message. I'm not going to be validated for my pain, and I have to just suck it up, and I'll never learn how to deal with this. Instead of getting the nurturing from the mom, which it's naturally seeking, it's told to not have those messages evaluated and go right back out and deal with this pain, but it really never dealt with the pain, you see?
It's a wonderful example, Dr. Welge. You know, it's funny because as you were speaking, I was thinking of a slightly different one, and then when you kind of got to the punchline, I was like, oh yeah. So, you know, here's the mom was like, go suck it up, right? You're tougher than that. In this family, we don't take shit from no one, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I grew up in Brooklyn. That's how it was, you know, right? But I was thinking about the anxious mother that I had, whose method of doing a lot of things was distracting me with something else. Not dealing with why I was upset, not helping me deal with how upset I am, but distracting me in a serial way long enough for the emotions to die down, but never really reconciling with me and never helping me reconcile for myself. And I had that I was just thinking, wow, in my own life, you know, like my mom, you know, she would, because I got, my wife, I think called me out on it. My kid was having a tantrum and I found myself trying to distract them with stuff rather than addressing, because he was upset because he needed to go somewhere, but he wanted to eat the fish that was being cooked while it's still warm. I don't even believe it because he doesn't even care about eating warm fish, but he got that in his head that that's what he wanted. I want my salmon warm. And we still took him, and he really, really fought hard about it. And at some point, I just was overwhelmed by the emotion. I just wanted to stop. And I was looking to make it go away, not really dealing with his emotions, because addressing his emotions was way more important than making him stop making noise for me. So to piggyback on what Dr. Welge, is it Dr. Should we just say Alex, Eddie and Alex?
Alex is good. Just say
We're
Alex and
doctors,
Eddie.
we're
Yeah.
psychiatrists.
Alex, Eddie, and George.
So to piggyback on what Alex said, I would just say that, like, I've been doing a very similar thing to you, George. Now, whether I'm right or wrong about this, I'm not sure either, right? But I really pull myself to the opportunity to apologize for stuff I've messed up on. And I've actually messed up on a lot of stuff. I've kind of done a bunch of stuff to screw my kid up out of my own anxiety, and then I have an authoritative style, and my wife's style is different, and I wasn't doing my part to adjust for the fact that we're giving this kid two different styles, and I was definitely doing things off. And when I realized all the parts that I was messing up, I started apologizing, and he was pissed. And I would apologize, and he wasn't even saying okay. He was pissed, and he would have plans about how to, like, get rid of me, you know, like he was a 3-year-old trying to get rid of his dad, you know, and you say it's Freudian, blah, 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 blah. But no, it's because I did things wrong, and I put him in a situation where he felt he needed to address it, you know, and so I'm a big in my own life. I apologize to my kid. I demonstrate. He just chatted. He said, "Hey, who's stronger, you or my babysitter?" I'm like, probably him. He's 21, plays like soccer a lot. He's big and strong. It's probably him. It burned a little bit to say that, you know, because daddy needs to be the strongest, but, you know, it's okay. I said, you know, maybe daddy's stronger in some things, but probably not everything, you know, right? So, but let me connect this directly to addiction. And you'll like this, Alex, and maybe you'll like it too, George. There's, you know, when a kid grows up with an addicted parent who inadvertently always seems to lie to themselves and everyone around them, to overpromise and underdeliver in so many different ways to everyone around them, that kid is so much more likely to take that path and to behave in those similar ways. But when you have a parent who fights and comes out on the other side in recovery, despite the hardships that that young person was put through in the addiction of their parent, the fact that they could make it to the other side is such a powerful lesson to the child that it's a very powerful resiliency mechanism that I think is imparted to them through that. So the best thing you could do if you're a parent who has an issue, if you're worried about your kid, is fix your issue. You fix your issue and you're honest about it and you share how you did it with your family, that's going to be more protective than anything else, because they're going to know, if my parent could do it, I could do it. I've had plenty of mothers say this, like, as they went through the Center for Great Expectations, like, they're like, look, I know I got a problem, but I'm going to do the right thing. My mom's 10 years sober. I could do it too. You know, I watched her do it. She was rough living with her, man. You don't know, but like, she did it. I could do it, and they do it. You know, so it's a very powerful message to not just to show your own vulnerability with your kids, but to be that level honest about who you are as a person with your children.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that example, and it's really the important thing also you're teaching them is honesty. It's ultimately being brutally honest with yourself that you're going to be able to conquer this addiction. It's the lies you tell yourself and the lies you tell to everyone else that keeps you in this trap. And you have to face this thing. If you keep lying, it's going to be impossible to get your way out of this thing. So that's another thing you're teaching them, is to be honest. And you conquered it. You showed them in real time it can be done. It's going to give them a tremendous hope. But the key thing in addiction is to really look at yourself honestly. It's going to be hard, but you're going to have to look at the demons you got in your closets. You got to look at everything, because this is ultimately what you are going to have to face honestly to conquer this thing. When we talk about rock bottom, what is it? It's a place, in my experience, where you have become so humbled by this addiction, your narcissistic bubble, that you're seeing the world through, and you failed everything. You cannot find a way out of this. You've tried everything. You've lost your job. You're losing your relationship. You're running out of money. Everything is crashing. And you humbly submit to say, you know what, I don't see something, but I'm asking for your guidance. You reach out to a good Samaritan who may help you see something that you're not able to see yourself, because you finally got to the realization that I cannot solve this problem on my own. I am not able to see it. I don't know how to solve it. And so that honesty is finally going to help you then, because you're now looking at it honestly. You're not trying to outsmart yourself. You're not trying to, oh, okay, I got this. I'm going to take care of this. I can do this. Life is telling you you can't. So what it takes ultimately is getting to that point to say, you know what, you're right. I am not able to solve this, but whatever I'm doing isn't working.
Let's go backwards now. So
okay.
Honesty is the answer. Yes. Well, why would people lie to themselves, right? It's back to what we were talking about before. Escape. They're in a situation, and it could be in their own skin, that they're so, and you commented about PTSD. When you think about war PTSD, guys, their PTSD a lot of times has to do with what they thought about themselves in that scenario. It's very, very particular. It's not like, oh, I saw bad things happen. No, it's more than that. I saw bad things happen and I could have done something about it, but I chose not to because I was afraid for my own. Something more specific happened, right? You lie because if you don't, you have to deal with it. And if it's so uncomfortable, then you can't deal with it. So you lie, you sedate yourself, you imprison yourself, you punish yourself sometimes. There are plenty of people that are addicted right now because they think that they deserve this. It's a horrible, horrible, dark thought, but I also think it's true. I think that's why it's such a dark thing. That's why, people could know the right things to do, but if ultimately inside their heart, they think that this is their destiny because they're a bad person who has to live out their life like this because of the horrible things that they think they might have done.
Right. Well, this is very important what you're saying, because really, that's the mental trap. That is the rat trap in yourself. You see, you can never solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. The level of consciousness that led you into that problem is where you're at. To get to a higher level of consciousness takes some work and needs growth. You need to think of the same scenario with a different mindset to be able to solve this problem. Otherwise, you're trapped in the mindset of the problem. You may blame yourself, but if you raise your awareness, you grow, and you achieve a higher level of consciousness, you can forgive yourself, because back then, at the level of consciousness you were at, you couldn't see a way out of this. And that may help you to let go of what has happened and help you grow to a higher level of consciousness. But it's only once you get there. And how do you get there? That's the key. So
I'll piggyback about how
ultimately,
to get there, because you can't see something that you don't believe exists. So you have to believe that there's something outside of this. And if you could believe it, then you're able to potentially find it and use it. George, what did you think of what Alex was saying about Rat Park and this whole experiment? Do you think It's more the environment or more the drug, if we're gonna like simplify it in that kind of way. Like,
I think it's more the environment. Myself, you know, and once again, I'm not a clinician, you know, I'm just a regular guy, but I think it's if you're in an environment that's very supportive and you're learning from people and you're feeling that you're also able to teach people and there's camaraderie, there's enjoyment in life, I feel like that can kind of help people. If they feel part of the community, they feel a sense of connection. I feel like that is very helpful for people dealing with like addiction issues. So it was a
1,000%, 1,000% as far as how to help someone actually gain recovery. But, you know, there's a guy out there, and I'm blanking on his name, but he's a professor at Columbia, and he's been running around for the last 5-6 years, like really taking a very hardcore position about this, where it's like, it's all environment, none of these drugs are addicting. Look at me, I've been using heroin safely for years now. And that's what he goes around saying. He does heroin recreationally. And my personal opinion is that he's not being honest with himself, and he's addicted to this opioid. And that while I so strongly agree about the role of environment and connectivity as a need that in the nucleus accumbens substances are substituting for, right? Just like the need to eat with the rodent models, or sleep, and so on, and drink. But I'm not ready to give away the biological underpinnings of this, even if for the very basic reason is like, if you hyperstimulate yourself with an opioid, even if you have a perfect life and somehow magically you could use heroin and not get addicted, but you're still going to probably affect how you might respond if you actually do have pain and need it. And why we and so I don't understand the scientist or clinician that go very polar to the environmental side of things. Yeah, that's the guy.
Right. I think it's a bit of both. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think, like you're saying, you cannot ignore the biology. We talked about the dopamine response, the higher dopamine that happens in the nucleus accumbens, the way your genetics do play a role into this. It may not be everything, but it's an interplay of these two things. But I think the way you're talking about this is exactly, I mean, think about it this way. If you had a child that was the center of your life, and as a family, everything is all about the child, right? The child is what in a way life has brought this child, so it becomes the center. You make it about something bigger than yourself. And that child gets love, and you enjoy that childhood. That child's going to have very little need for other bonding. It's going to have so much nurturing and bonding from you that maybe even if it does have a problem, it's going to come back because it knows it's got you to support and nurture it, right? So that loving vibe has to be there, and I think that's what we have to focus on helping. Like in this situation, how do we get those children back into that bonding support structure? If you don't, for example, the way you talked about your own experience, the Dr. Gabor Mate, I think he's very, very well versed in this, and everyone should look at his stuff. And if you look at what he described, he said that he needed a sense of validation. He wanted to be wanted. He became a doctor to satisfy that wound. And when he became a doctor, everybody wanted him. He was being paged. Everybody was calling him. Everyone's needing him all the time. He got that validation constantly. And then he became addicted to that work. And then as a consequence, his family suffered. His nuclear family suffered. Maybe not, he didn't think about how he was affecting them, but he was getting that validation. But his own children didn't get any attention from him, right? And so was he intentionally harming them? No, but he did harm them because of this problem. So then you honestly apologize to your child. I'm sorry I missed your whole childhood while I was caught up being such a great doctor and getting that validation. Right? So this is the dynamic. The pain is the thing that you're actually treating. So the pain is the most important focus of how do you break this, is actually build this sense of community and the strength for this child, but at the same time for the addicted child to help figure out personally and specifically what exactly are you suffering from that you needed to escape from and deal with? What is the actual thing in your particular situation? Is it a fear of abandonment? Is it a fear that you're not good enough? Is it a fear that I'll never be good enough for anybody? Is it a fear that you don't feel wanted? Is it a fear that you're not being validated, you're not being nurtured, you're not being understood? You know, what is it deeply that pained you?
It's ultimately that, right? It's validated, right? Some kind of completeness, a sense that this is who you are. I see you, right? That's like a powerful thing. I see you. It's not just something that could be in the Urban Dictionary. You know what I mean? It's like there's power to that, and I think, you know, I was going to argue with you when you started talking about tablets, because like I don't think the problem is the tablet or a kid's screen time necessarily. I do think the problem is the messaging about what is healthy parenting. You know, I think if the parents and children have FaceTime, then I don't think it's a challenge to for a child to also have screen time. But when there's a style of, you know, for lack of a better phraseology, like lazy parenting, where it's like, hey, mommy wants to do this, so take the tablet, go do that, and you figure it out. That could be problematic. Now, the kid might actually benefit in some ways, autonomy, creativity. They'll learn things that they might have not, maybe precociously they weren't supposed to learn, but they might actually develop in some positive ways because of this bad parenting, you know, bad. But what it also definitely will instill is that this thing that isn't the best connecting thing is going to be a suitable substitute for you moving on in your life. So anytime you feel empty, you shouldn't be, because you have these things that should be able to fulfill you. And so you don't even know that you're not your optimal self in your life, because you've never addressed, you know, how to be fully fulfilled with human beings in your life and real relationships, right? And that's true for a lot of our patients now, right? George, look, what percentage of your friends play video games?
It's probably like 30, 40.
Dude, you're a married man, and 40% of your friends might be married too, playing video games, right? Yeah. Now, like, that's not even an abnormal thing. I'm not even going to try to criticize it. Right. You know, like, I was a kid, I had blisters on my fingers playing video games. And I made a very conscious decision that I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it's not fun. I'm not going to do it because I don't like them. I'm not going to do it because I know how much time I will end up dedicating to them because they're so compelling. Like, it's real respect for the industry that makes a very compelling product, right? It's like, that's what, I stopped watching football. I love football, man. As a kid, I used to play football. Oh man, I would zig and zag. I thought I was good, you know, like, I love football. And I used to watch games every Sunday. I used to know this stuff. And at some point in my young adult life, and I was, wow, I have to be in medical school and in residency. Like, how do I spend this large percentage of my free time after work and dedicated things? How do I spend the majority of my time on watching something on TV? That doesn't matter what that is. You know, it's like, I decided I wasn't going to participate in that. And so as much as I love it, I just cut it out of my life. It's been over a decade. I don't watch football. I don't watch basketball. I did that with basketball too. I don't watch TV. Like, because I have a respect for the medium. Now, I'm a little bit addicted to Instagram. You know, I'm a little bit addicted to Instagram for sure. For sure. I watch all these amazingly fit people exercise in all these cool ways. And instead of exercising, I watch other people exercise. Right. That's how I know I have a problem. Because I'm like, wow, I have 45 minutes. I can get a workout in, and then I watch a video for 30 minutes.
Yes, yes. See, you know yourself, though. You see, I stopped watching TV in 2006. My wife said, you know, we're wasting too much time. We just sit here, feel worse, and we have all this time that we're losing. We should be doing things in this time. You know, we can always get our own movie, right? But look, I'm not saying that all technology is bad. Look what we're doing today. This is good. We can use it for good. There's a positive way to use it. There's a way to integrate it into your life. And then there's a time for maybe we'll take a technology weekend and all as a family go camping in the park together. Get connected to love of nature again. Enjoy each other's company in that way without the technology for a weekend. You know, punishing children for what they're doing for the technology is not the right. I'm like, okay, so you take this one medium that has now become the bonding substitute for the child. Everything is now here. The hottest girl in school is watching me on my Facebook, or I'm part of this group in my mind. You take that away from me as a teenager, and I want to impress that girl. Now what's she gonna think of me? And that child might go kill himself. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do? What you maybe take the thing away, but then spend more quality time with your child. Replace the bonding that really is nurturing. Okay, take the bonding from the social media, but then also replace it with the bonding that's more healing.
Address what they're escaping from. They're escaping an environment where they're not feeling loved, they're not feeling accepted, they're not feeling a part of. Next week when we talk about system theory, the reason we're going to be talking about system theory is we'll ultimately introduce the topic of identified patient. And that's an important kind of terminology in understanding how to help people heal, because you have to understand all the participants that contributed to the problem. And when I say the problem, I don't even mean the addiction. I mean the thing that the addiction becomes the solution for, right? As we've alluded to several times. Yeah, so far pretty good. So pretty good discussion about this. I was, again, whenever you said, you know, might kill himself, I was like, oh man, do people really kill themselves because of stuff on the internet? I really hope not. I really like to think that when that happens, it's a tragic accident. You know, it's like, I think the majority of people that do that type of act, they're not crying out for help, they do it and they get it done. You know, that's the stereotypical 55-plus-year-old divorced man who owns a gun, right? If he's in who drinks, if he's in a bad place, that's his exit. But I'd like to think that that psychiatric underpinnings still determine the main bad behavior that we see, like super destructive behavior, right? Because, you know, the idea that, you know, you could bully someone into suicide consistently as a paradigm is a terrifying paradigm. Like, is it possible? Has it happened? Yes, sure. But I'd like to think that most people are designed resilient enough to not necessarily, you know, harm themselves and, you know, to that degree. But this is we're learning as we go along when it comes to the medium of social and how we use it and how our kids use it and the impact that it plays in our lives and in our kids' lives. So, you know, maybe I'm full of crap. You know, here I am addicted to it, and I don't think it could infect my kid enough to have a particular bad behavior. Obviously, I'm being affected to have a bad behavior. So, you know, it's almost like it's a difficult thing to almost accept. Which again goes, why do people lie to themselves? Why do parents lie to themselves about what they might be seeing with their kid for why their kid is a problem? Because the truth might be such an uncomfortable environment, you know, that psychological torture.
Yeah, and in the end, you know, when you're going through a crisis and you don't have that support structure, you don't have the family that you know you can always call no matter how bad things get. You don't have somebody in church or a good teacher who's always looked out for you to rely on, someone in your community, somebody in your neighbors. Then you're all by yourself dealing with complex emotions as a child, and you don't have that nurturing, loving thing to turn back to, which is the isolation is part of this. You know, the loneliness that you're dealing with something overwhelming for you as a child. And I think, you know, it's hard to kind of make people I think technology it can be used if we just understand it. There's an addiction to technology, which we will have another discussion about. But in the end, when things go horribly wrong, your Twitter followers are not going to be the ones that are going to help you. It's going to be your flesh and blood. It's going to be your closest friends. It's going to be your pastor in your community. It's going to be that teacher that believed in you. It's going to be that doctor that'll help you understand you're dealing with this trauma, but you're not alone. I'm going to help you through this trauma. I'm going to help you work through this. Those people are the ones we need to reconnect to. We need to rebuild a sense of community and loving thing, this same thing at the end of Rat Park, where you have so much nurturing and you then fight to preserve that presence of mind. You don't want to pollute that consciousness. You want to protect that space now because it gives you so much, and you don't want to jeopardize those connections, right? Once you fight through this and you achieve sobriety, and what it takes is usually rebonding with that life. In Portugal, they did this amazing thing, and it's a 13, I think, years experiment. Basically, they decriminalized all drug use completely, and then they said, instead of spending money putting people in jail, we're going to put all that money, invest in reintegrating into society.
Episode
and
number
ultimately,
4.
Episode number 4.
Decriminalization and harm reduction.
50% decrease in drug use, major decrease in overdose.
With respect to the Rat Park, Alex, did you pull up anything? Have there been any recent studies? Has anyone attempted to kind of recreate this in modern day?
I haven't looked into it yet enough. Thank you for getting me onto this topic, but I will definitely be looking for more recent work on this.
Because
I'm sure.
As far as I'm concerned, how difficult is it to try to replicate that experiment and to see, I want to do more than just offer community. I want to literally offer like everything that the animal would want other than drug and then drug.
Right.
I really want to load it towards the side of success and see what could happen.
Right.
I don't want to have a balanced situation. I want to load it towards success and see if it can make an impact. And that would be a fun documentary.
Absolutely. If you look at Portugal itself, that's a real life experiment. It's happening 13 years. Yep. The data is in there. You see a dramatic decrease.
We just ignore the data as a society, right? We know it's there. But are we going to say that with Portugal, so it's not the same thing, right? Or where do they give clean? They give heroin now in the Northern Europe country, right? There's a program there as well. There's a bunch of programs. There's a bunch of countries that do harm reduction where they actually not just offer clean needles and condoms, but they actually offer a supply to drugs. I think they did that in New York. I think there was a pilot project in New York City. They might have been.
Okay.
But again, this has been around, as you said, for over a decade, and we're only now coming around to the idea of discussing this. So that's, again, harm reduction and societies that do it better. We'll cover that in episode 4. George, what say you, closing remarks about your take listening to us jabber away about this?
Yeah, some of my closing remarks, to be honest, is whether you're a child of an addicted parent, whether you're a parent of an addicted child, you're not alone. There's a lot of people dealing with this. You're probably dealing with people on a day-to-day basis, dealing with certain issues that you don't even know. And what I would say is, I think the problem can get fixed in one day. So don't ever burden yourself with the pressures of fixing everything that's happened in the past tomorrow. It's not going to happen. All you can do is take one step at a time, discuss with loving people. There's plenty of knowledge out there. YouTube is great. You could do the school route. There's textbooks with great information. There's videos, there's audio, there's paintings. There's a bunch of information, I feel that are good resources. So overall, you guys are not alone. These type of discussions need to be had in order to kind of move our communities forward. So that's kind of my takeaway on the whole conversation.
There was a question that I only now noticed, and I lost it now, but someone asked, would we support a recovery center, letting people use under supervision? And that's just, I don't know how to answer that, because if the recovery center with the goal of getting off of substances, I'm not sure about using them. But
Yeah.
obviously, Dr. Welge and I are probably in favor of harm reduction strategies, and we're not mad at drugs. I think that's maybe that should be kind of our closing remarks. You know, if there's anything we could pull away from the Rat Park discussion,
Yeah.
is that to fully put all the responsibility of the problem of drug addiction and the harm that comes to the family and beyond on the actual substance is a gross misappropriation of responsibility. And sharing that responsibility collectively and in the relationships that you have with people, bringing that responsibility to those relationships is more likely to be the path towards successful outcomes. You know, you say, no, it's this drug. My doctor gave it to me for my pain, and because he gave it to me for my pain, he prescribed me more than I needed, and that's why I've been addicted for 20 years. Really? Yeah. Now that you could come off of pretty easily. So it's not so simple. So I would say that there's, I think, another question. Wait, follow up. Prevention. No, that's the same question. I don't know how to report, delete. I don't know what I'm doing. All right.
I think someone asked about the professor. I think I mentioned Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yeah, Gabor Mate is amazing. People should definitely explore Gabor Mate. He's out of Canada. He's a phenomenal, thoughtful man about the importance of a lot of things that isn't classic modern medicine, but very important to integrate with real treatment.
Right, and I think Dr. Peter Cohen about bonding, and Dr. Bruce Alexander with the concept of Rat Park. That whole
and if you want to explain, I don't want to talk about that guy. Whatever. All right.
We'll have plenty of time to go over it.
Thank you, Dr. Welge. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone that joined us for this discussion. Obviously, thank you for asking questions. I really wish I knew how to see them and address them better, but maybe next time. Thank you all again. Until then, ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Addicted kids, concerned parents, and all that stuff.